Hello. I'd like to talk today about a very remarkable theory that Amartya Sen has put forward, which is that if you can have multiple identities, then the world would be a better place. Now, it's a fact that if you can have multiple bodies, then world would be a better place for you because, you can stay in bed instead of going to work or going to school, and some other body of yours goes to work and goes to school. So, really, what Amartya Sen says is that if you have multiple identities, it's something very good and it will prevent fascism and it will prevent war. This is, I'm not joking, this is what he says. But we know that this is nonsense. We know that identity means the identity between your brain, your heart, and your body. When your body dies, your brain does not continue to function. Your heart does not continue to function. You're dead. You can't do stuff once you're dead. So, identity for human beings, it is something confined to a body which has a spatio-temporal existence. Amartya Sen says, no, no. You see, identity is what you belong to. So, for example, if you are Hindu, then your identity is that you're Hindu because you belong to Hinduism. But a Hindu can also be a Beyonce impersonator like me. I could be a Beyonce impersonator, twerking and. So, if somebody comes along and says, where is Vivek? I would say, it's not me. I'm not Hindu. I'm the Beyonce impersonator. So, in other words, by having this multiple identity as both Hindu, but if Osama bin Laden comes to cut my head off, I say, no, no, I'm Beyonce. And I start twerking and wiggling my bottom because it's my multiple identity. So this is Amartya Sen's ridiculous notion that identity is multiple. The truth is very simple. Identity is solitarist. That means you have one and only one identity because you have one and only one body, and when your body is killed or it decays or it dies, that's it, finished. And it has a spatio temporal location. Now, a body can buy things. I can buy stuff and I can sell stuff. And I can belong to this club or that club, and that club or this family could expel me as well. Now, so this has been known forever, except by Amartya Sen, who is inventing a new type of economics where you can have any identity, where you can have many bodies, but it's mad. Now, you see the word economics, it's from Greek, and the Greeks were smart. They were not from Bengal, they were not Amartya Sen, they were smart. And what the Greeks said is that, you see, economics is about oikos. Oikos means a household, it means the family lineage. And the household has to, manage resources. They have to invest in babies and children, education, and so on. If they want to survive, they have to, the households have to make economic decisions. And oikos is also related to words like oikumene. That means ecumenicism. That means the notion that there is a large part of the world where people are very similar. And, it's like when I came to England, people could immediately see that he comes from, mummy, daddy, there is a good family. You can trust him. He's not going to steal and cheat because, he's just like your own son or daughter. Not that I was like the daughter. I was more like the dog. So ecumenical behavior, where basically people treat you, like their own family or like somebody that they know from their own culture, even if you speak slightly different language or belong to a slightly different religion and so on. So ecumenicism is one aspect of oikos, and but there is another word that I want to introduce you to, and this is the word oikeiosis. Oikeiosis means belonging, it means appropriation. Now, this is a very fundamental concept for the Stoics, and it really, immediately the moment that you know this word oikeiosis, then you can put an end to a very stupid type of economic philosophy which culminated with John Rawls and which is carried forward by Amartya Sen. You see, there is a type of person who says, if you wipe your own ass, right? If you have a shit and you wipe your own ass, doesn't it mean that you are under an obligation to go and wipe everybody's ass every time they take a shit? Because how can you favor yourself? On what basis of justice? Is this just? It is completely unjust that you are wiping your own ass instead of going and wiping the ass of people whose asses are unwiped and may have been unwiped for many, many years. So, this is this type of shit economic philosophy exists. Now, in economics, in proper economics, which is a little bit mathematical, the resolution to this stupid nonsense was given, back in the 60s by John Maynard Smith. He was not an economist. He was using game theory to look at evolution and biology. But the term, you can look it up on Wikipedia, it's uncorrelated asymmetry. Where there is an uncorrelated asymmetry, then you don't have to worry about stupid, sententious, senile, Amartya Sen type nonsense, because the fact is that I only have one mummy. So I have to look after my mummy and I give her kisses. It doesn't mean if I give my mummy kisses, I have to go and kiss all the mummies in the world. No. Because there's an uncorrelated asymmetry. That is, in other words, that by which I know I am my mum's son and not the son of every single mother who might exist. I know that I own this. This is mine. I bought it. It's and I may sell it, but if you try to steal it, I'll punch you because it's mine. So these are uncorrelated asymmetries, and in any type of economic game, whether it's a coordination game or it's a discoordination game or it's a competitive game or it's a zero-sum game or it's this or that type of game, there will be uncorrelated asymmetries. Otherwise, all that you have is endless bullshit, which is what Amartya Sen specializes in. So let me give you an example of his profundity. He said, parable of the flute. Alice makes a flute. Bob is very poor. He doesn't have any toys. Clara can play the flute. So he asks the question, who should own the flute? Answer is, Alice should own the flute. She made it. That's an uncorrelated asymmetry because only one person made the flute. But this idiot Sen, he goes on writing nonsense saying, no, somebody will say that we should give it to Bob. But Bob can't play the flute. Why would he want it? But he's saying, no, we should go. This is nonsense. So, in an academic symposium or seminar, this type of nonsense, they don't have to reach any conclusion. They just, this guy talks nonsense and the other guy talks nonsense. So, but the fact is that if Alice makes a flute, it's her flute, let us sell it to Clara, who can use the flute. That's it. It's an uncorrelated asymmetry, and it gives rise to what's known as the bourgeois strategy. The bourgeois strategy means that if you own something, if it's yours, then you defend it, and you spend a little bit of money protecting that right. Whereas, if some other, some Amartya Sen can come along and say, who does this really belong to? Then nobody will invest any money in protecting their property rights, because this bloody idiot, this cretin, has undermined all property rights, and so just take it. It's like what happened in Bihar, where Jayaprakash Narayan was running around like a headless chicken. And Jayaprakash Narayan was a very smart man. He was a Amartya Sen Oikeiosis. He was very well educated. And he kept on going, what is the difference between participatory democracy and representative democracy? And what does ownership really mean? And, so the result is that Bihar turned into a shithole. Because you see, if you have Bhudan, if people are giving away land which they don't own, and the people who receive that land, they can't sell it. In fact, they have no title to it. So what's happened? What's happened is that nobody knows who owns what. So basically, Vinoba Bhave and Jayaprakash Narayan, under the excuse of Bhudan, they screwed up Bihar. They turned it into a shithole. Vinoba Bhave said, I will not leave Bihar until all the land is redistributed. And he was such a nuisance that if you look up Wikipedia, it says that Bihar Dhan ho gaya, that the entire state, or 98% of all the land in Bihar, was gifted away. Because, allegedly, it was just cosmetic. It was just, it's like I could say, I am dedicating all the billions of pounds that I own, I am giving it all to my Guruji. But I don't own shit, Well, it's just, anybody can give away a property that doesn't belong to them, and if there is no title, there is no conveyancing, there is no legal title being passed, there is no consideration. It's just bullshit. It's empty words. And this is what Amartya Sen does. Now, in the case of Bihar, that once Vinoba Bhave was convinced that Bihar Dhan, 98% of all the land in Bihar had been given away, then he left. What a cretin. But, he was, back in 1950, Nehru and others had come along and had a big meeting. And Nehru said, look, all this Gandhian shit is rubbish. We can't run a modern state on that basis. And Vinoba said, okay, you're right. I'm going to go off to the boondocks. I'm going off to the villages, and I'll do my shit over there, and you guys carry on. Yeah. So Bhave was not a bad guy. He went off into the villages, and he supported Mrs. Gandhi during the emergency, because he knew the alternative would be worse. So Bhave was not a bad guy. Jayaprakash was not a bad guy. But it was a waste of time. Amartya Sen is not a bad guy, but what he's doing is a waste of time. He's basically saying that, you can have many identities. You can't. You can only have one identity, and it's based on your body. This body can have different traits. It can own different things. It can pay membership to different groups. So this is the word oikeiosis. In other words, I can have different circles of oikeiosis, provided I pay my dues into all these different circles of belonging. And so you have overlapping circles of Oikeiosis, of belonging, and this creates arbitrage opportunities, but it also, of course, it could create suspicion that this person is a spy, and this person is, so there are two sides to it. But what belongs to you does not define your identity. What Amartya Sen is saying is that, you see, your identity changes when your endowments change, when what belongs to you, or which club goods you have subscribed to. They're saying that you have multiple identities on that basis, and this is false. It's like saying that a guy who currently owns a Rolls Royce, and now he's made a bit more money, he's bought a Bentley, he's bought a Porsche. What Amartya Sen is saying is that now his identity has become multiple. No. The identity is the same. His endowment set or his consumption bundle, that has changed. So Amartya Sen should know this. But you see, the thing is that he's a terrible economist. He's really screwed up economics, he's screwed up philosophy by making very elementary, very childish errors. And the question is, why is this stupid idiot, why is he tolerated? And the answer is threefold. Firstly, he comes from Calcutta, which by 1970 was known as the shithole, the asshole of the third world. It was the worst place in the world. And he comes from there. He crawled out of there. And he went around saying, democracy prevents famine, even though in Calcutta, in East Bengal, which is where his ancestors, he identifies as being from East Bengal, not from West Bengal. And the fact is that twice in his life there was a terrible famine there. And yes, there was a food availability deficit, but because of the corruption, both in 1943 and in the early 1970s, because of corruption and because Bengalis really did lack civic virtues, as Mujibur Rahman pointed out, or as Janam Mukherjee in his recent book has pointed out, Bengalis wouldn't even dispose of their own dead. White people would come and do that. In 1968, Mujibur Rahman says that the Bengalis were not disposing of the dead. The white RAF people from Britain, they were disposing of the dead. This is shocking. It's very bad. But it shows that the transition to democracy in Bengal exacerbated mortality, famine deaths to a considerable degree twice during Amartya Sen's life. And yet the idiot says, democracy it's got magic property against famine, which is, the reverse has been proved by his own country. So the point I'm making is that every type of analysis that Amartya Sen indulges in, it involves magical thinking. It involves taking the most childish assumption. A child may say, a child who's just been caught eating the cake, I am not the baby who ate the cake. It was another baby. It was naughty baby. I'm nice baby. This is multiple identity theory. This is what Amartya Sen is saying. He's saying that you have multiple identities. And then some wicked force is forcing people who have Hindu identity to kill all those Muslims. This is, what he's saying. It's nonsense. People don't kill each other unless there is a penalty for not killing and a reward for killing. So, it is his puerile thinking which is why he has been given a Nobel Prize, and that and he's received every year since then, he's received some prize or honorary doctorate or the other. Every year after year, decade after decade. Even though everything that he says is foolish. But why? And the answer is that the branch of academia that he represents is degenerate. It is magical thinking. It is a substitute for religion. And in this respect, Rabindranath Tagore, people say he was a very boring man and so on, but he wasn't as stupid, he wasn't as boring, and he wasn't as crazy as Amartya Sen. So Shantiniketan, it didn't just degenerate because the government took it over. It also degenerated because people like Amartya Sen represented the new type of Bengali Buddhijeevi. There had been a deterioration in the Buddhi of the Bhadralok Buddhijeevi. And this is why, though Bengal is still a fantastic place. Calcutta is probably the most livable, the most wonderful city for all sorts of reasons. But some Bengalis laid it down. But so what? They emigrated. They did no harm. Anyway, God bless. What I mean is, if you're Bengali, please don't come and beat me up. Beat somebody else up. Because I have multiple identities. Please read Amartya Sen and discover that the identity which said something a bit rude about Amartya Sen, it is not my identity. So don't beat me on that basis. Beat somebody else up. Beat yourself.